Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going on a journey.
Ooh, a journey.
Yeah, through the world of Charles Darwin
Okay.
and his theory of evolution. We're going deep
Yeah.
into excerpts from Darwin and his theory of evolution.
Okay.
I love how simple that title is. But how this seemingly unassuming guy
Oh, yeah.
changed our understanding of life on Earth.
You know, it's funny how we picture these big scientific minds, like as these eccentric geniuses.
Right.
But Darwin was actually, like, really shy and reserved,
Really?
an unlikely revolutionary.
Wow.
And yet, his work led to these debates that are still going on today.
That's what's so interesting about this, right? He's not the stereotypical aha moment, scientific inspiration.
Right.
Our source material really emphasizes that this was like a gradual journey to this groundbreaking theory shaped by his lifelong fascination with the natural world.
Right. And his 5-year voyage on the HMS Beagle.
Oh, yeah.
That was a turning point for sure. Imagine years at sea, exploring these different ecosystems.
Oh, wow.
From the coast of South America to the Galapagos Islands.
Wow.
It's like stepping into a real-life laboratory of evolution.
Speaking of the Galapagos Islands, they
Yeah.
seem to be like this pivotal part of his story.
Right.
Was it there among those finches that the theory just clicked?
You know, not quite. And this is where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Darwin actually had, like, the basic framework
Really?
of the theory within 2 years
Wow.
of getting back from his voyage.
Okay.
But he didn't publish. He waited over 2 decades.
Over 20 years. That's a long time to just sit on such a revolutionary idea. Was he afraid of, like, I don't know, the controversy it might cause?
He definitely knew it would challenge some very strongly held beliefs. I mean, back then, remember,
yeah.
the prevailing view wasn't just, God created life, but that each species was individually and perfectly made,
Right.
fixed, unchanging.
Yeah.
It was called special creationism.
Okay, so he was going up against, like, a whole worldview, not just, like, a scientific theory.
Right.
So it makes sense that he'd want to be sure, absolutely sure, before going public, but something must have happened to finally push him, right?
You're absolutely right. It was another naturalist,
Okay.
Alfred Russel Wallace. He independently developed a theory,
Oh, wow.
super similar to Darwin's.
Huh.
Great minds think alike. But it was a wake-up call for Darwin.
It's almost like a scientific race.
Right.
Did they, like, end up competing, or was it more collaborative?
It's a testament to their integrity, and collaboration.
Okay.
Instead of this big battle for recognition,
Yeah.
they actually presented their findings together
Really?
to the Linnean Society in
Yeah.
1858.
Wow.
And then just a year later, Darwin published his masterpiece on the origin of species. And the rest is history.
History. And I'm guessing full of controversy, but
Oh, yeah.
before we get into that, wasn't the idea of evolution kind of already around? I feel like I've heard of other scientists who are thinking about how species might change.
That's true. This idea of species transforming or transmuting
Yeah.
wasn't totally new.
Right.
Even Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus Darwin,
Oh, really?
had explored this idea.
Okay.
But Charles Darwin gave a very clear and compelling mechanism for how it works. Natural selection.
Right.
That was the breakthrough.
Natural selection. Okay. Remind us how that works.
Sure.
I think even today, people have misconceptions about what it actually means.
Absolutely. So he built his theory on 2 main principles,
Yes.
right? First, he recognized that there is natural variation in every population.
Okay.
Think about a litter of puppies. You'll have some bigger, smaller, some bolder,
Right.
some more timid.
Right. So it's not like evolution, like, creates these differences.
Exactly.
They're already there, and some might just be more helpful than others depending on the environment.
And that's the second principle. Those variations that give an individual an advantage for survival
Okay.
or reproduction, those are more likely to be passed on
Interesting.
to future generations.
So it's not just like survival of the fittest.
It's reproduction of the fittest.
Right. Those best suited to their environment live longer and pass those traits on.
Precisely. In fact, the source material gives a great example about camouflage. Let's say you have a population of moths, and some have light wings, some have dark wings.
Okay.
Pollution darkens the trees they live on.
Right.
Suddenly, the darker moths are better camouflaged.
Oh.
Less likely to be eaten by birds,
Yeah.
more likely to reproduce,
Right.
pass on those genes. Over time, the whole population might shift toward having those darker wings.
So it's like the environment selecting
Right.
which traits are the most successful.
That's right.
But Darwin was missing a crucial piece to this puzzle, right? He didn't know about genes or DNA.
That's right, which makes his insight even more remarkable. He deduced all this without understanding the mechanism of inheritance.
Wow.
The discovery of genes and mutations came much later
Okay.
and provided that scientific basis for how variations even come about.
So you have variation, and the environment favors certain variations. That's natural selection in a nutshell.
Right.
But to explain how life is connected through this process, he used this great analogy.
Right.
The tree of life.
It's such a brilliant way to visualize evolution.
Yeah.
The trunk represents the earliest life forms.
Okay.
And as species evolve, diverge,
Yeah.
they branch out
Okay.
this intricate web of relationship.
Right, so we can see how everything's connected. Like
Yeah.
this common ancestry, it's not just individual species changing. It's this grand narrative of life itself just unfolding and branching out over millions of years. But this idea of common ancestry, especially humans being related to other animals,
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure that was a major sticking point back then.
Oh, absolutely. It went against the religious belief of special creation.
Right.
Not just scientific facts, but humanity's place in this whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. If humans weren't specially created, part of this bigger tree of life,
Right.
big questions about our relationship with the natural world, with God even.
Right.
No wonder it sparks such intense debates.
Oh, yeah. Very intense.
So let's unpack some of those reactions and how the religious debate evolved, so to speak,
I like that.
in the next part of our deep dive.
Looking back.
Before the break, we were talking about all these intense debates
Right.
that Darwin's theory sparked. It wasn't just science, it was cultural and philosophical too. So as these ideas spread,
Yeah.
how did other scientists react at first? Was it immediate acceptance or was there pushback?
It definitely wasn't an overnight thing. You know,
Yeah.
back then, special creationism was the main idea.
Yeah.
And he was asking them to abandon that.
Right? Each species was individually created.
Perfectly created.
Wow, so he was challenging,
A whole worldview.
yeah, no wonder there was resistance.
Right.
What were some of the scientific objections to the theory?
One of the big ones was the fossil record.
Okay.
It was pretty incomplete back then.
Right.
Critics said, if evolution is gradual,
Yeah.
we should see tons of these transitional fossils
Okay.
showing those changes step by step.
Interesting.
But there were gaps, and they used that as evidence against him.
That's a good point.
Right.
If one species turns into another gradually, shouldn't we see those in between forms? How
Exactly.
did Darwin address that?
He knew the fossil record was incomplete,
Okay.
but he argued it still showed evidence.
Okay.
He'd point to extinct species that were similar to living ones,
Right.
suggesting a common ancestor, even if we didn't have the whole lineage mapped out.
Okay.
He basically said, give it time, we'll find more fossils.
And he wasn't wrong.
Right.
It's expanded so much since then.
Huge.
Many of those gaps have been filled in, science building on itself, refining the theory,
Exactly.
but the fossils couldn't have been the only challenge, right?
Another one was the complexity of some structures, like the human eye.
Yeah.
Critics said such intricate things
Right.
couldn't have just evolved through small, random changes.
Right. How could natural selection, acting randomly,
Yeah.
create something so perfectly designed?
It's the irreducible complexity argument.
I've heard of that.
It makes sense to think an eye must have been designed that way from the start.
Yeah, it's almost intuitive.
Right.
So what did Darwin say to that?
He said even those complex structures could have developed through smaller, simpler steps,
Okay.
each step giving some advantage along the way.
So not a perfect eye appearing suddenly,
No.
but each little improvement being beneficial
Exactly.
and getting passed down. Wow. And he did this before knowing about genetics.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
He kind of predicted genes and mutations before we knew about them. It wasn't until the 1900s, early 1900s,
Okay.
that genetics came along and filled those gaps in.
How did genetics solidify Darwin's theory?
Well, it's the modern synthesis,
Oh,
right? It's
I-
like genes and mutations explained how those variations Darwin saw actually happen.
Okay.
Genes, those DNA segments, have the instructions for building an organism.
Right.
And mutations, those are changes in the genes bringing in new
So
variations.
those random mutations are like the starting point for natural selection.
Yeah.
Some bad, some neutral,
Right.
but sometimes one gives an advantage.
An advantage,
Yeah.
even if small, means a better chance of survival,
Okay.
reproduction, and passing those genes on.
This back and forth between chance and the environment.
So elegant.
It is, explaining all the life we see.
I know.
So these two things, Darwinian evolution and genetics, coming together to explain it all.
Yeah.
Did this modern synthesis convince the skeptics in science, finally?
Big changes take time, of course. But as evidence grew, and scientists from different areas added to this view of evolution,
Yeah.
it became the main explanation for all this diversity.
Like a big detective story with fossils, genes,
All
all pointing to the same thing.
it is.
But let's not forget, it all started with that controversial book.
Right.
We talked about the science pushback, but what about the religious community? That's where it got really heated.
Darwin challenged some deeply held beliefs.
Yeah.
Especially special creation, so important to many religions.
Easy to see why humans evolving from primates,
Right.
not being created in God's image, that changes everything.
Huge implications.
About our relationship with God, with the meaning of life even.
Absolutely.
It's not just biology anymore.
You're getting it.
Yeah.
It's our place in the universe.
Right. That's where the clash with religion gets really interesting.
It does.
Let's dive into those reactions and how that debate, evolved.
I see what you did there.
In the next part of our deep dive. Welcome back to our deep dive into Darwin's world. It's amazing how relevant a theory from the 1800s still is today.
I know, right? It's not just history. It shapes how we see the world, even now.
So Darwin's legacy isn't just about old books. It's about ideas that are still important. How is his work playing out in the 21st century?
Well, think about biodiversity. Darwin's theory explains how all the variety of life on Earth came to be.
It's a key to understanding the history of life, right?
Exactly. And it's not just academic. It helps with conservation efforts.
Oh, right, like protecting endangered species.
By understanding how species evolved and what makes them vulnerable, we can protect them better.
So we're not just understanding the past, but protecting the future, too.
Exactly. Darwin's work helps us do both.
You mentioned other areas where his ideas are relevant. What about medicine?
It's crucial there, too. Think about bacteria and viruses. They evolve so fast, becoming resistant to drugs.
Like they're always one step ahead.
Exactly. And understanding evolution helps us develop new antibiotics and vaccines to keep up.
It's a constant race. We create a drug, they evolve, we have to create another one.
Right, and Darwin's ideas are the basis for understanding this arms race.
It's wild to think a theory about finches is helping fight diseases.
And it goes even further. Darwin's ideas are in artificial intelligence and computer science, too.
Really? How so?
The idea of survival of the fittest, applied to algorithms, helps create systems that learn and adapt on their own.
So Darwin's not just about biology, but a way of thinking, a way to solve problems in different fields.
Exactly. It's a new lens to view the world, helping us understand change, adaptation, and how everything's connected.
It's really amazing. But as we wrap up, we should remember that while Darwin laid the groundwork, our understanding of evolution is still, evolving.
Of course. Science is about constant exploration. Darwin would be blown away by what we know about genetics now.
Imagine explaining the human genome to him, or gene editing.
He'd probably think it was science fiction. But I think he'd be thrilled to see how his core ideas have held up and been expanded on.
It's like standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Building on what came before.
Precisely. He'd be excited to see this vast, complex web of life that his theory helped reveal. And who knows what we'll discover next.
Maybe he'd even tell us to keep questioning, keep pushing boundaries like he did.
Right. That's what scientific discovery is all about.
So to wrap up our deep dive, we've explored Darwin's journey, his revolutionary theory, and how it changed everything. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration as much as we have.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the fascinating world of knowledge. It's out there waiting to be discovered.